Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and just when you think you know people, fate turns the cards, leaving you defenseless before the ruthless truth. Today, I will tell you a story that will pierce your soul. My name is Alina. I'm 25 years old, but I'll start at the very beginning. I got married early, at 17. My husband is 2 years older than me. He was my first high school sweetheart, at least I thought so. Yes, there was a liking for him, even a passion at first, and then it turned into a habit. My husband carried me in his arms, dusted me off, took care of me when I was pregnant, so he spoiled me. A year after we married, my daughter was born. I didn't go to school or work, and my husband studied and worked. It is true that money was tight. My husband was just beginning to make a career, and I was beautiful and therefore capricious. Other than taking care of the baby, I did almost nothing around the house. My mother was doing it, and she didn't like it. I began to get annoyed with everything: the house, the family, and my husband. All in all, we lived with him for 5 years, and with those years, I felt completely cold to him. Although the fact that I do not love him, I realized after the birth of my daughter. All this time, I just let him love me. Then one day I looked in the mirror and realized that my husband was not the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I began to dream of a rich prince on a white horse who would take me and my daughter to the distant lands where I would drown in luxury. I imagined myself a rich lady. Of course, my husband wasn't an alcoholic or a boatman. We were not poor, but not luxurious either, and I wanted more for myself and for my daughter. And so I waited for my prince, God damn him. I met Vitas, 33 years old. His parents emigrated to Switzerland, where he lives now. He speaks good Russian. He has his own international tourist business, a chain of his own hotels for tourists. At first, he and I just corresponded secretly from my husband, but then we communicated via Skype. I was a caring mother the whole time, pretending to be a loving and tender wife, despite the fact that sex with my husband had become part of my domestic necessity. At the same time, I was dreaming about my prince, whom I had already fallen in love with no memory and a new luxurious life. And then that long-awaited day arrived. Vegas was going to come to Poland and would stop by our city. I was just over the moon. The only thing that scared me was the upcoming conversation with my husband, because he loved me. Vedas arrived a week after informing me of this. I met him at the airport with a gorgeous bouquet. Then we went to the hotel where he rented a business class room. After that, we took a walk around the city and then went back to the hotel room, which is where everything first happened between me and him. I felt like I was in a fairy tale. I hung out in his room for 2 days, turned off my cell phone, and at the time I thought about nothing but my happiness. 2 days later, Vitas told me that he had finished his business in Poland, that he was going home, and was ready to take me and my daughter with him. Me as his bride. I immediately agreed. There was a crucial moment to talk to my husband. When I got home, my husband attacked me, telling me where I was and everything, that he had already called all the hospitals and morgues, and was going to report me to the police. But then I told him that I was leaving him because I had met and fell in love with another man. I told him that I was leaving with him and that I was taking my daughter with me. He fell to his knees, cried, begged me to think, but he seemed so pathetic to me at that moment. I told him not to humiliate himself, not to embarrass himself, and to accept everything as it was. All he had to do was give his written consent for his daughter to go abroad. He said that if I decided, I could leave, but he would not give me his daughter. I threw a tantrum, called him a loser, that because of his stupid jealousy and resentment, he deprives his daughter of a bright future. Then I began to convince him that I was not depriving his daughter, that she could come to him on vacations, and he could come to visit us. We were even ready to pay for his trip, but I was not going to deprive my daughter of her own father. They would talk on Skype at least every day, but my husband was reluctant. I went back to Vitas and told him everything in tears. Vitas hastened to console me and suggested we go, but without my daughter for now, look around. find another way to do it without his consent. You see, this is Poland, where everything is bought and sold, right up to the elections in the country. We'll bribe someone, and he will be deprived of his paternal rights if he obstructs us. In that case, he'll never see his daughter again. We'll think of something. I told him I had to pack. He laughed and said he would only take my documents, and that he would buy all the things I wanted on my arrival. Old things for me to leave here, along with the old life, to my husband as a memento. Let him look at them, and remember the woman he lost. These words made me feel a prick of conscience for the first time, because my husband was not guilty of anything. When I came home to get my documents, I started to persuade my husband again to let my daughter go with me. I told him that millions of people meet and break up. I admitted that yes, I was being mean to him. I even asked him to forgive me, but we shouldn't deprive our daughter of a better life because of unnecessary offenses. But he did not want to listen to me. He started to talk about leaving again, said that it was a blur and that he was ready to forgive me everything. But I didn't care anymore. I said that I would come back and we would continue the conversation in court. Just before we left, Vidas told me that we had to stop by his hotel in Turkey on the way. Some unforeseen things had come up just for a day to sort out some formalities, and from there we would fly to Switzerland and at the same time relax. I was glad. When we arrived in Turkey, we were met at the hotel and escorted to his room, which he told me was his own. They brought champagne and a light breakfast, but he opened a bottle, poured glasses, and said, "Here's to new life." After the champagne, I felt faint, my eyes swam, and I fell asleep. That was the end of my fairy tale and the beginning of a real horror movie. I woke up in a windowless room, completely naked on the floor, without my phone and documents. After a while, 3 guys of Slavic nationality came in and congratulated me on my arrival. I started shouting, protesting, calling for Vidas, and they told me that they didn't know any Vidas and that I was their property now. Then I was beaten and abused. This went on for 2 days, where they kept me in the cell completely naked, beating me, abusing me, stabbing me with some trash. I still had a bad perception of the reality of what was happening. At first I thought it was just a nightmare, and then that I had died and gone to hell. But I was wrong. It was only purgatory, and the real hell was waiting for me ahead. These guys came in and took me to the shower, made me wash, then threw me some clothes and demanded I get dressed. Then they took me to a room where a man of about 45 to 50 years of Southern nationality was sitting and informed me that I was me from now on, that my life was in his hands, and that I was working for him from that day on. He asked me if I had any idea who I worked for. Later I learned that this same Vidas, or whatever his name was one of a bunch of couriers who delivered beautiful girls for prostitution, not only from Poland, but Belarus, Moldova, Russia, Czech Republic, and other countries. They are lured under the guise of a job, a career in art, or, as in my case, a new, beautiful, easy life, and then they sell them in brothels. Although there are enough people willing to go, they are not interested in drug addicts and girls of passion. They choose the clean and beautiful, and they don't mind the married ones. And so when I protested that I would not become a prostitute, they hit me again. And then they shoved pictures of my daughter in my face and told me that if I refused to work, if I tried to run away or commit suicide, there were their people in my city. They knew my address. They would find me and rehabilitate my family. Then they made me call my husband and tell him that I had found my happiness, that I would have children of my own, that I was no longer interested in him or my daughter. Again, they reminded me of my daughter, asking if I really didn't need her. I did as they said. My husband told me not to call again and to forget the number once and for all. At the same time, this guy said that if I was smart, obedient, and did a good job, I would get a nice bonus. What followed was 6 months of hell. I was sold like cattle at the market, bullying, humiliation, and beatings became the norm. Several times I got pregnant, had abortions, and then I was forcibly sterilized, and now I can my clients were perverts, sadists, and scumbags, sometimes even several at a time. It hurt and disgusted me to think about it. After a year and a half, I managed to get out of it. I was taken by a client, my compatriot, an older man, who said that I looked a lot like his daughter, and I told him about my misfortunes. He suggested I run away, but I said no, telling him they would kill my family, to which he said convincingly that threatening my daughter was just a threat and a bluff. When a woman leaves her husband and child and runs off with her lover, it's not uncommon for anyone, so it's unlikely anyone would give a damn. But when there's physical violence against a member of the family, they can get away with it. And what's the point of doing anything about my daughter after she escapes to hang another problem on themselves? They won't risk it. In general, he persuaded me, and he managed to deceive me and bring me to the embassy. And as I found out on the spot, this man was a reserve officer of the Ukrainian Secret Services, and he began his career in the Soviet KGB. My passport was restored. I had the normal amount of money I had saved over the year and a half, and I returned to Poland. I thought that this was the end of my nightmare, but it wasn't. There were other people living at the address where I used to live with my family. I found out that my husband had declared me missing, filed for divorce, sold this apartment, and bought a new one, bigger and in a more prestigious area. He took my mother to his place and took custody of my daughter. I went through a full course of rehabilitation, first in a clinic, then in a sanatorium. Psychologists worked with me, I had money, and then I learned to be a hairdresser. I told the police everything and even filed a complaint, but they lamely promised me that Interpol would deal with them. And then I tracked down my ex-husband. I will never forget that meeting. He didn't even say hello or ask, but asked what I wanted from them. We sat in a cafe for 3 hours. I deliberately told him everything, but in his eyes I saw not a shadow of sympathy or pity, but only coldness and pity. My husband told me that neither he nor my daughter needed me, and that I should go back to the panel where I belonged. I told him I wanted to see my daughter and was legally entitled to do so. He said with a chuckle, "So sue me," and pulled out a stack of pictures from his inside pocket and threw them on the table. My benefactor was right. These scumbags did not touch my daughter, but they sent pictures of my husband to an email address where I am with clients. My husband said that I can take them as a memento. He still has them, and in court, if I try to fight for my daughter, he will show them. Also let my mother see, and she has a heart condition. She just can't survive it. In addition, he recorded our entire conversation on the phone, where I poured out his soul, hoping for forgiveness, understanding, and sympathy. I have never seen my husband like this. He has always been a soft body to me, ready to step over himself to forgive anything. But here I saw before me a completely different man, cruel, cold, who did not hide his pity and hatred for me, despite the fact that he had once loved me. Of course, on the one hand, I understood him. I had betrayed him, but I had paid the price. My husband told me not to come into our life anymore, or else everyone would know about it, even my daughter. He told her that I was dead, that before my betrayal, I was a loving wife and a caring mother. Let my daughter remember me that way. Better let her think of her mother as dead than as the one who betrayed her family, ran off with her lover, and became a prostitute, even if the latter was not of her own free will. So what difference does it make? I tried to talk to my mother, but I met with neither understanding nor sympathy. She told me not to dare go anywhere near the daughter she abandoned, and not to convince them that it wasn't like that. Now, I don't even know what to do. I often think back to all the good times we had with our family and with my husband. How he was kind to me, but I didn't appreciate it. And I ask if it is worth the fight. I really want to see my daughter. I miss her very much, and my husband too. I do not judge his behavior, and do not hope that he will ever forgive me, but I was left all alone. What do I do now? I repent of everything. What's the bottom line? I am currently working as a hairdresser in a high-end salon. Divorced. My only daughter lives with her ex-husband, and I am in my late grandmother's Yes, this is